To the delight, or perhaps discomfort, of boxing fans everywhere, Oscar De La Hoya's infamous Clapback Thursday series is back in full force, and it's making waves in a way only Oscar can. For those unfamiliar with the series, Clapback Thursday is when the Golden Boy, who is as known for his boxing career as he is for his outspoken and unapologetic opinions, targets some of the most talked about topics and individuals in the sport. After a brief hiatus, fans and critics alike were eager for Oscar's return to the spotlight. This week, De La Hoya didn't hold back, using his platform to go after some of the biggest names in the sport of boxing. The primary target? None, other than Saul Canelo Alvarez, the boxing superstar who has long been the face of the sport. But what made this particular episode of Clapback Thursday so compelling wasn't just the fact that Canelo was in the crosshairs. It was the sheer number of different aspects that De La Hoya took issue with. From questioning the legitimacy of Canelo's upcoming fight against Crawford, to taking shots at the way he has handled his relationship with his fans, Oscar seemed determined to make his voice heard. The most explosive part of De La Hoya's latest rant centered around the upcoming fight between Canelo Alvarez and Crawford, which is being billed by some as the biggest fight of the decade. Now, De La Hoya, who has been around the boxing scene for decades, both as a fighter and a promoter, is no stranger to big fights. So, it's no surprise that he doesn't buy into the hype surrounding this particular matchup. In fact, De La Hoya flat out dismissed the notion that this could be the most significant bout in modern boxing. For him, Canelo's upcoming showdown with Crawford isn't nearly as competitive as some are making it out to be, and he had no qualms about expressing his disbelief. According to Oscar, Crawford, who is moving up 2 weight classes to challenge Canelo, is setting himself up for a potential disaster. De La Hoya argued that Crawford's decision to step up in weight will put him at a distinct disadvantage, and the fight, in his eyes, will be more of a formality than a true challenge. He pointed out that Crawford is coming off a recent bout with Israel Madrimov, where he fought in his usual weight class, so jumping up to face someone like Canelo was, in his view, a recipe for disaster. While the media may be hyping the fight as the pinnacle of boxing, Oscar doesn't believe it will live up to expectations, and he was quick to voice his doubts. For De La Hoya, the idea of Canelo having an easy night against Crawford takes away from the integrity of the sport and raises questions about the true competitiveness of this mega fight. But the criticisms didn't stop there. De La Hoya, ever the controversial figure, also aimed his sharp words at Canelo's relationship with his fans, particularly the loyal Mexican fan base that has supported Canelo throughout his rise to stardom. For De La Hoya, there's been a shift in how Canelo approaches his fan base, and not for the better. He suggested that Canelo, once a proud representative of Mexican boxing and its supporters, has now become so focused on expanding his brand and his business ventures that he has neglected the very people who helped build his career. Oscar questioned whether Canelo truly cares about his fans anymore, especially given how the timing of his fights and the way they are marketed seem to prioritize commercial interests over his connection to the fans who have followed him from the beginning. In Oscar's eyes, Canelo's rise to global superstar status has led him to place more value on making money and furthering his business empire than on staying true to the roots of his career. This shift in focus, according to De La Hoya, speaks volumes about Canelo's current priorities, and it seems that Oscar is deeply disappointed by it. To him, boxing is more than just a business. It's a sport with a rich tradition, and fans, especially those who have supported fighters through thick and thin, deserve to be treated with the utmost respect. By allegedly turning his back on the people who helped him rise to the top, Canelo has, in Oscar's view, compromised the authenticity of his own success. However, the most severe attack in De La Hoya's Clapback Thursday wasn't reserved for Canelo alone. It was directed at Reynoso, Canelo's longtime trainer. In recent years, Reynoso has found himself embroiled in controversy after a number of his fighters, including Jaime Munguia, tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs, PEDs. This was a particularly sensitive issue for De La Hoya, who had been Munguia's primary promoter for a decade. Oscar pointed out that it wasn't until Munguia began working with Reynoso that these positive tests started to emerge, and he wasted no time in drawing attention to what he saw as a troubling pattern. For De La Hoya, the repeated PED failures from Reynoso's camp are not just an isolated issue, but a serious red flag that deserves a deeper investigation. He made it clear that the fact that several fighters from the same camp have tested positive for PEDs is not something that should be ignored. De La Hoya was highly critical of the fact that no formal investigation had been launched into Reynoso's training methods or his fighters' drug use. In his eyes, the lack of scrutiny is not just surprising, but incredibly suspicious. Oscar went as far as to say that it was unethical to have 6 fighters from the same camp testing dirty without anyone raising serious questions about what's going on behind the scenes. 6 fighters, and nobody's investigating this? Doesn't this seem suspicious to you? De La Hoya asked rhetorically, clearly incredulous. How is it ethical that we have 6 fighters from the same camp testing dirty, and yet there's no real investigation? No one's asking the tough questions. This is a major issue, and it should be looked into, especially given the pattern that's emerging. De La Hoya's comments were pointed and sharp, as he was adamant that this situation wasn't something to brush under the rug. In his mind, this wasn't just a case of a few bad apples. It was a serious matter that had the potential to tarnish the reputation of an entire camp. The fact that these failed tests were coming from Reynoso's gym, a place that houses some of the biggest names in boxing, raised major concerns about the integrity of the training methods being used. For De La Hoya, these failed drug tests weren't just about individual fighters. They were a reflection of bigger issues within the sport, and he was calling for action. Oscar also went further by suggesting that there might be corruption within the media surrounding these issues. He expressed the belief that many members of the boxing media might have been paid off to keep quiet about these PED failures, and that the lack of accountability was indicative of deeper problems within the sport. Many people in the media have been bought off, De La Hoya claimed. They're muzzled, and no one is asking the hard questions. How can we have 6 fighters from the same camp testing positive, and nobody is investigating this? It's clear to me that something shady is going on. For Oscar, the failure to hold Reynoso and his fighters accountable wasn't just a problem for the athletes involved, it was a problem for the entire sport of boxing. His words reflected his belief that boxing is increasingly being run by people who are more interested in making money than preserving the integrity of the sport, and that the lack of scrutiny is only enabling this culture to thrive. At its core, De La Hoya's clapback Thursday wasn't just a rant about Canelo, Reynoso, or even the failed drug tests. It was a statement about the state of boxing itself. Oscar, a fighter who's had a long and storied career, has always been vocal about the business side of boxing. He's worked both in the ring and as a promoter, and in both roles, he's seen how the sport has changed. De La Hoya is deeply frustrated by what he perceives as a shift in priorities within the boxing world, one that has moved away from competitive integrity and towards pure business. For him, boxing is about more than just the big paydays and flashy events. It's about the athletes, the fans, and the history of the sport. De La Hoya is calling for the sport to return to those roots, for the fighters and promoters to be held accountable, and for the integrity of boxing to be preserved above all else. In the end, De La Hoya's comments are sure to keep the conversation surrounding Canelo and Crawford's upcoming fight alive for even longer. His bold criticisms have already sparked debates within the boxing community, and as the fight draws nearer, it's clear that this will continue to be a hot topic. Whether or not Oscar's words have any impact on the outcome of the fight or the future of the fighters involved is still to be seen, but one thing is certain. De La Hoya isn't afraid to speak his mind, and he's more than willing to make waves when he believes something is wrong. His clapback Thursday may be controversial, but it's undeniably effective in getting people to pay attention. For De La Hoya, this is just the beginning of what could be a much bigger conversation about the future of boxing and its place in the broader world of combat sports.